Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of my talk on the Phaedo. In this discussion I will introduce the idea of intertextuality and provide some examples from the text of the Phaedo, as well as examples of references to the Socratic texts in other texts which, now that you have read the Apology and the Phaedo, may become apparent to you. Once again, please email questions to me for the Q&A at maria.cipriani@hofstra.edu. So what is intertextuality? Put simply, it is the interrelationship or interreference between texts. One reason to be well read is for the enjoyment, or some might say the game, of finding these hidden or not so hidden references among texts, and with that recognition, being able to discern deeper meanings from the text that you're reading. To me, it's one of the things that makes studying literature fun. The notion of intertextuality is attributed to literary critic and philosopher Julia Kristeva. Kristeva argued against the concept of a text as an isolated entity, which operates in a self-contained manner or vacuum, and Kristeva states that any text is the absorption and transformation of another. While Kristeva's notion of intertextuality seems to refer only to the written word, in 2020, I define text to include visual images and narratives that are more popular than exclusively written narratives, which often borrow from one another and refer to each other. Multimedia and other forms of art will fit into this category. Every text, every cultural object, film, web content, music, sculpture, is a mosaic of references to other texts, genres, and discourses. Some texts refer directly to each other, such as in remakes of films. Some texts make extradiegetic references to other texts. That is, extradiegetic is references that are outside of the trajectory of the narrative. And I'll give you an example in a moment with The Simpsons. And the interpretation of references that are made within text to other texts is influenced by the audience's prior knowledge of the other text. So if it goes over someone's head because they don't know the text, there's a level of enjoyment that might be missed, though of course the main text itself should provide enough enjoyment without the extras of intertextuality. For example, and as people in my sections know, I often refer to the Broadway musical Hamilton. I will do it here again. The intertextual references that Hamilton makes to lines from historical speeches, lines from other Broadway musicals, as well as to lines from music and rap songs are arguably all examples of intertextual references. People who do not know historical speeches, Broadway musicals, or rap songs still enjoy Hamilton, but knowing one, two, or all three of these other genres adds a layer of understanding and, arguably, enjoyment to this musical. So what's this for? Why are we looking at intertextuality here? Intertextuality is a source of audience pleasure. It credits its audience with the necessary experience to make sense of references like this, and it offers the pleasure of recognition. Also, referring to other texts in multiple genres reminds us that we are in a mediated reality and that we are watching, or in this case, reading, through the lens of the text as it's presented to us. How does this work in the Phaedo? I decided to look for intertextual references in the Phaedo because upon reading the Apology, the reference to Aristophanes' play The Clouds, which spoofs Socrates, made me wonder about other literary references, both deliberate, as the reference to the clouds in the Apology, and more circumspect, as the reference in the Phaedo, line 70c, to the same play and to the, quote, comic poet Aristophanes. Aristophanes' play may have been one of the reasons that Socrates found himself in trouble to begin with. A reading of the Clouds would provide a more in-depth understanding of how Socrates' reputation may have been colored by this popular play. Even without knowing the play, one can see that it certainly had some influence on how people saw Socrates. But what about the Phaedo? Are there intertextual references in it other than the one oblique reference to the comic writer? The Phaedo makes two references to Homer's Odyssey and one to Homer's Iliad. As Socrates is about to make a journey or odyssey of his own, the fact that he would refer to the Odyssey seems natural. In fact, at line 94d, when he is arguing about the immortality of the soul, Socrates refers directly to the Odyssey and quotes it, as Homer wrote somewhere in the Odyssey, where he says that Odysseus, quote, struck his breast and rebuked his heart, saying, "Endure, my heart, you've endured worse than this." If the reader knows the Odyssey, as Socrates' audience certainly would have, the point that Socrates makes is reinforced by the direct reference to Book 20, line 17 of the Odyssey. In the discussion that follows about the soul being a harmony, Socrates cites the divine Homer as his source or backup, and again, as he and his students talk about coming to grips with the immortality of the soul in, quote, Homeric fashion, Socrates is making direct and explicit reference to Homer. A more explicit reference to Homer's text can be found in line 112a, and in the note 18 actually says that the quotation, quote, far down where there is the deepest pit below the earth, refers to the Iliad, Book 7. As Socrates describes the underworld, Tartarus, the river Styx, and other aspects of his way of conceiving the cosmos, his cosmology in 112 and 113 is a description that is very much in alignment with Odysseus' experience of the underworld in the Odyssey. So, intertextually speaking, if one has read the Odyssey, one would be reminded of it when reading these sections. One might also wonder, or at least I did, given Socrates' description of the circle of Oceanus, as well as of the other rivers and places in the underworld, did the Athenians imagine a world to be round like a plate, the way the medieval Christian church did, or round like a ball? The Greeks believed the latter. I looked it up, and that begs a question. What happened that people in Christopher Columbus's time believed that the world was flat? But that's for another lecture. At the beginning of this lecture, I talked about the fun of discovering intertextual references. And speaking of Homer, many popular modern texts, which include the moving picture and other media, make reference to ancient texts. For example, a hallmark of the Simpsons series was references, spoofs, and plays on the names of older works of literature and the characters in them. Homer Simpson is named as a deliberate and direct reference to the ancient poet. So not only did Socrates' Plato refer to Homer, modern writers also use this Socratic/Platonic inspiration. Over the years, television series like Xena Warrior Princess and South Park reference Socrates. And I have to note that both of these shows use the theme of death, particularly when featuring Socrates. Socrates is also referenced in modern visual media. The dialogue Phaedo is rife with drama, and the movies made about Socrates' life are many. The movies of Socrates' life and the Platonic dialogues are more directly referential, but in addition, Aristophanes was not the only one to spoof Socrates. Witness the 1989 movie Bill and Ted's Most Excellent Adventure, which is funny in itself, but also takes on a more interesting depth after reading the Phaedo, as death is featured prominently in the movie. Like those books of images which, when you know how to look at them a certain way, show 3D images, and I cannot do that in a slide presentation, intertextuality brings a depth and interesting possibilities to readings and viewings of the text one experiences. Some people expand intertextuality to include art and sculpture, and why not? Where have you seen this guy before? Dr. Singer pointed out the sculpture of Plato and Socrates here at Hofstra. I encourage you to look at it next time you're near Axon Library. And here is that statue. What we see is a youngish Plato talking to the bust of Socrates. That bust is a reproduction of Greek stone sculpture with the word Socrates on it. The names on the scroll and the order that they're placed in is interesting. Also, the world that Plato is pointing to is round, like a ball, not a plate. And what is that symbol on the ball? It looks familiar. It actually looks like something that we see on the dollar bill. So, whose names are on the scroll? In what order? Informed by your reading of the Apology and the Phaedo, what story might that sculpture be telling you? I welcome your questions for the Q&A. Please email me again at maria.cipriani@hofstra.edu. If I don't get to your question during the brief Q&A, I will certainly answer your email. Thank you.